Hello, Shalom Mishpachah from Sermons on the Cave. I'm Dean, and we're taking a break from our mountain cave, but we're going through the book of Deuteronomy, and the first 5 books of the Bible, we believe, were written by Moses under the inspiration of God. And we're coming to the end of Deuteronomy, which is the 5th book, and Moses is elderly now. He's nearing the end of his life. He's going to pass on to be with the Lord soon. And he is not going to be allowed, along with the rest of his generation, to go into the Promised Land. You see, Moses was given the law on Mount Horeb, but the law would not be able to take us into the Promised Land. Instead, God would provide Joshua, whose name means Yahweh is salvation. That's the provision that God would use to take the people into the Promised Land. It's no different than Jesus Christ becoming our salvation on the cross and paying our price for sin, and all that who believe in him will cross over and into the Promised Land through his provisions. And what's interesting is that in chapter 10 we see Moses. He has broken actually broken the tablets of stone, coming down to the camp, leaving the mountaintop experience, coming down and finding the camp, the people of Israel engaged in idol worship, engaged in sexual immorality, engaged in all kinds of wickedness, just in the short time that he was gone. That's all it took. And in his frustration, he threw down the tablets of stone that held the 10 Commandments and broke them. And I believe it's symbolic of the fact that the law was never meant to save us. It was only meant to show us that we can't keep it, that we needed something more. We needed a perfect sacrifice. We needed a substitution, propitiation for our sin, which would come later on, thousands of years later, when Jesus Christ would be born. What's interesting in the chapters between 10 and 28 is Moses goes over the law again. He goes over the section in chapter 28 of blessings and curses, and he basically told the nation of Israel that if you keep the commandments, if you are obedient to God, then God has all these blessings for you. But on the other hand, if you don't, then here's all these curses that are going to befall you. And interestingly enough, there were 15 blessings and about 45 curses. So we pretty much realize that God was pretty certain that what was going to happen. How I want to read part of chapter 28 to you, and it talks about how what's going to happen. It says, the Lord will cause you to be defeated by your enemies. You shall go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them, and you shall become troublesome to the kingdoms of the earth, and your carcasses shall be food for all the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and no one shall frighten them away. And if you keep going through here, it just talks about all these curses that will befall them. And we keep going on here. I think it's verse 45. Let me see. And it says, moreover, all these curses, this is in chapter 28 of Deuteronomy, verse 45. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon you and pursue and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord your God to keep his commandments and statutes. And it says that if you keep going on here, it says, and they shall besiege you at your gates. Now this is interesting. What's interesting about this, verse 52, is this is a prophecy. We now, looking back in retrospect, know that in 70 AD, Titus, the Roman general, put a siege against the city of Jerusalem for 4 months. And it was at the time in the fall when all the fall feasts were. And there were hundreds of thousands of pilgrims that had come for the fall feast, where they had to come annually to Jerusalem to worship, to sacrifice. And so he had put his soldiers around the city and captured all these people inside the walls and the regular residents. And what we know is that it took 4 months, and all kinds of atrocities and horrible things happened within those 4 months. I'm trying to find one of them. It says that, listen to this, they'll besiege your city, your gates throughout your land, which the Lord your God has given you. You shall eat the fruit of your own body. Now listen to this. You shall eat the flesh of your own sons and your daughters, whom the Lord has given you, in the siege and desperate straits in which your enemies shall distress you. The sensitive and very refined man among you will be hostile towards his brother, toward the wife of his bosom, toward the rest of the children whom he leaves behind. So it will not be given any of the flesh, so that he will not give any of them the flesh of his children whom he will eat, because he has nothing left in the siege and desperate straits in which your enemies shall distress you at the time of your gates. And the tender and the delicate woman among you, who would not venture to set the sole of her foot upon the ground because of her delicateness and sensitivity, will refuse to her husband of her bosom and to her son and daughter her placenta, which comes out from between her feet, and her children whom she bears, for she will eat them secretly for lack of everything in the siege and desperate straits in which your enemies shall distress you at all your gates. And what's interesting about that is that we know that this happened. This is historically recorded in the books. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, he was kind of defected and went to the Roman side, and he was there. He was an eyewitness of this siege, and he was actually in Titus's entourage, and he wrote about all the atrocities and all the things, the macabre scenes that he saw. They were crucifying 500 Jews a day. There were so many bodies, they were piling them up. I mean, it was a very horrible thing. Not only that, but the Jews were being afflicted by the Romans from the outside as they pressed in upon them, but also inside the gates, the Jewish warlords. There were 2 or 3 factions of Jewish warlords that were also raping and pillaging their own people. I mean, this was a desperate situation, and there were so many people and so little resources that there was just a lot of nonsense. There was a lot of desperation. There was a lot of criminal activity, and these are all recorded by Josephus in his book, if you'd like to read about them. But you can also read about them in Deuteronomy chapter 28, that was written like 1,200 years before this event took place in 70 AD, and even Jesus talked about it too. And we'll get to that on the next one. But from Sermons on the Cave, be good, take care of yourself, pray always without ceasing, and love one another as Jesus loved us. Shalom, Mishbocha.